Welcome to the European Parliamentary Research Service podcasts.
The debate on nuclear energy is back on the table, presenting both challenges and new opportunities. But European countries are split about this, and discussions are likely to continue as new laws on climate and energy are in the pipeline. Want to know more? Stay with us.
Nuclear or not nuclear? That's the key choice ahead, especially in the context of the EU's green transition and the need to secure its energy independence. But whose choice is it?
Deciding which energy sources to use and whether to include nuclear in the mix is up to each member state. However, there are common rules and standards set by the Euratom Treaty and by more recent EU laws to ensure the secure handling and disposal of nuclear materials.
The EU also guides and funds nuclear research activities and helps EU countries in decommissioning old plants. But how big is the nuclear sector in Europe? Here are some figures.
The EU counts a total of 100 nuclear reactors operating in 12 of its 27 member states, and half of them are in France. The other 15 EU countries are nuclear-free, and Germany managed to shut down its remaining power plants in April this year.
But this nuclear phase-out is not equally embraced across the EU. 2 new reactors are under construction in France and in Slovakia, and other countries who were traditionally non-nuclear, like Poland, are advancing similar plans.
Now, according to Eurostat, in 2021, nuclear energy made up 13% of Europe's energy mix and was the largest single source of electricity generation in the EU, accounting for 25% of all electricity produced.
Yet different countries rely on it to different degrees. So while France produced 69% of its electricity in nuclear plants, in the Netherlands, this figure was only 3%.
So what's the debate about?
The nuclear power debate has always been about risks and benefits, but the underlying question is how electricity is best produced now and in the future. And both the EU and several of its member states are growing increasingly interested in the potential offered by small modular reactors to advance its net zero goals. But what are SMRs exactly? Here's Monica Dulian from the European Parliamentary Research Service.
They are smaller than conventional nuclear reactors, with power outputs of between 10 and 300 megawatts. They are easier to install, as their standardized design means they can be mass-produced in a factory and then assembled on site. They can be used for district heating, power for energy-intensive industries, and production of green hydrogen. Although not available yet, they could be by the early 2030s.
The EU is also trying to break the current cycle of dependence on Russian nuclear technology, natural uranium supplies, enrichment services, and the handling of nuclear waste. While it managed to quickly cut down on Russian coal, gas and oil supplies, it can't seem to do the same for nuclear.
In 2021, Russia's state-owned atomic giant Rosatom supplied the EU's reactors with 20% of their natural uranium, handled a quarter of their conversion services, and provided a third of their enrichment services. And although many countries are trying to diversify their fuel supply, dependency is unlikely to decrease.
Another important challenge is how to manage nuclear waste and spent fuel. Although radioactivity decreases over time, these materials can pose a risk for thousands of years, so it's important to dispose of them safely.
And a solution appears to be deep geological disposals, where waste will remain for hundreds of thousands of years until its radioactivity becomes minimal. Finland, France and Sweden have already selected the sites, and some of them may open as early as next year, while other EU countries have begun to take steps.
So, are we witnessing the revival of nuclear in Europe?
Well, the debate on nuclear versus non-nuclear is shaped not only by objective energy needs, but also, to a great extent, by public perception of risks and benefits. And accidents like Chernobyl, or more recently, Fukushima, still weigh heavily on people's minds.
But debate intensified following Russia's invasion of Ukraine. The sharp decrease in energy supply, coupled with a spike in energy prices, became a turning point. And some countries that were hesitant towards nuclear energy have now changed their mind out of pure necessity.
Belgium, for instance, has delayed plans to phase out nuclear energy by 10 years, and the Netherlands is considering building 2 new power plants by 2035 that could supply up to 13% of the country's electricity.
What's clear is that France is seizing the momentum to rally more support for nuclear as a way to simultaneously ensure energy sovereignty and decarbonisation, and to boost the economy. Let's hear the words of the French Minister for Energy Transition, Agnès Pannier-Runacher, before a meeting of the so-called Nuclear Alliance countries in March this year.
I repeat, today we have 25% of electricity on a nuclear basis. This nuclear power allows us to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions, represent less CO2 than photovoltaic and wind power, and it's an asset for Europe. An economic asset, an asset also in terms of employment, and an asset in terms of climate.
On the opposite end of the debate are Germany and the so-called Friends of Renewables, which include countries like Austria, Denmark, Latvia, Portugal or Spain, among others. To them, renewables are the only way forward. Leonor Gewessler is Federal Minister for Climate Action, Environment and Energy of Austria.
Renewables are the energies that will have to handle the vast majority of the task. These are the technologies of the future, a no-regret option, and we should focus on that.
So, the two sides continue to clash, especially about the role of low-carbon energy sources produced from nuclear in the green transition, and whether or not nuclear and renewables can be put on an equal footing in various pieces of energy and climate legislation, such as the EU taxonomy classification system for green investments, which provoked some serious clashes between EU ministers.
And discussions are likely to continue as new EU legislative proposals emerge, also within the European Parliament, between supporters and detractors of nuclear. Here's Michael Bloss from the group of the Greens European Free Alliance.
Nuclear power is inefficient. There are many problems that are not solved. For instance, where to store the waste for 1 million years. And it is not a quick solution. A nuclear power plant might be built within 10-15 years, but we need to have the solutions now, so therefore we must focus only on renewables.
Frank Bogovic from the EPP Group is the Parliament's rapporteur on the own initiative report on small modular reactors and has a very different take on the subject.
Nuclear and renewable energy are complementary and will ensure enough competitive and green electricity for transition into a carbon net zero society. Very promising is also the development of small modular reactors, which can decarbonize district heating, processing industry, and production of hydrogen.
Want to know more? Check out Monica Dulian's full policy brief on the EPRS website or in our app.
This is a European Parliamentary Research Service podcast.
Thanks for listening.